Welcome everyone to our Breaking into Tech event. My name is Diana Raimundo and my pronouns are she/her. I'm an implementation strategist at Greenhouse, as well as the 2022 director of Alpha Boston's Tech Committee. I'll be monitoring today's conversation with our four incredible panelists who you see on video, as well as myself. They will be sharing their journey on how they transition into tech after starting their careers in a different industry. Before I introduce you to our panelists, however, I want to introduce you to Alpha Boston in case you're not familiar with us. Alpha Boston the Alpha Boston chapter was established in 2000 and is one of many chapters in the US today. Our mission is to provide opportunities for leadership development, community engagement, and networking for Latinx individuals in the greater Boston area. But in today's virtual world, we also extend our mission to folks outside of Boston. To meet our mission, we have a number of committees to bring events to you. As you can guess, tonight's event was put together by our tech committee, whose goal is to empower more Latinx and Hispanic professionals to pursue careers in the tech industry. In just a moment, I will introduce you to the panelists, where they will share their journey through a series of questions we've prepared for tonight. After this, we will have some time where you can ask questions, so please feel free to use the Q&A button at the bottom to submit your questions, but also feel free to interact with each other via the chat as well. Without further ado, let me introduce you to our panelists in alphabetical order. So our first panelist is Brian Gonzalez, who is Vice President of Marketing at Sigo Seguros. Brian is an advocate, activist, and community leader who is the founder and host of Hablando Queer, a podcast that explores what it's like to be a queer Latinx person navigating the world. They are also a marketer with over a decade of experience helping companies reach more customers through storytelling and human-centered advertising. Our second panelist is Jose Mata, a regional talent acquisition manager at Slalom. I practiced saying that, Jose. Jose has nearly a decade of experience helping people find jobs in technology. He is on the global leadership team for Slalom's Unidos ERG with a mission to empower their Hispanic and Latinx employees throughout their careers. Jose is a proud Cuban American and graduate of the University of South Carolina. Our third panelist is Laura Rivera, a business intelligence engineer at Wabibo Data Solutions. Laura is a Latina raised in Chicago. She started a career in veterinary medicine, but quickly realized its unsustainability and forged a new path into a tech career. Laura attended a coding bootcamp to make her transition and has been thriving in the world of tech for the past 3 years as a consultant on the global technology team for a very famous multi-billion-dollar fast food chain. Our fourth panelist is Maca Valencia, who is on the talent team at Boston Consulting Group in Gamma, the company's data science unit. Maca is from Chile. She has been living in Boston for the past 5 years. After doing her MBA at Babson College, she wanted to switch careers to tech and did so. Maca is also part of the Latinas in Tech Boston chapter. All right, so let me stop sharing my screen and let's jump into today's conversation. I know we've given folks a snippet about your background, but please share more with us. Tell us your tech story, such as what industry you were in and what led you to pursue a career in tech. Let's hear from Brian first.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I have a very interesting background in that I went to college and grad school for music. I have my master's degree in opera performance. So I was a singer, but at the same time, I knew I wanted to do marketing. So I pursued marketing. And right after college, I went into higher education. I was mixing marketing and the music world. So I was doing marketing for a music university. It was all really great. I think I got an experience where I worked for a particular department that moved really fast and that where I got to wear a lot of hats, which is very rare to do in higher education. And as I was thinking of my career, I really enjoyed wearing the multiple hats. I really enjoyed the fast pacedness of things. And I found that the tech world, specifically the startup world, could really be a place where I could potentially like do really well. But it also allowed for economic mobility. It allowed for me to be able to have a very different freedom that I didn't necessarily have before. So that's kind of where I very purposefully started looking for jobs within tech and how I found myself in tech.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Laura, what about you?
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm gonna make a very long story short because the path has been quite wild. But I grew up very humbly in Chicago, terrible school system. You know, information about career paths was very limited, especially with my parents who didn't grow up here. So I just wanted to be what every little girl wants to be, a veterinarian. And long story short, I graduated with my degree in biology. When it came time to apply for vet school, I found out it was about $300,000 to attend, and first year out, I'd be making $60,000. So I figured that was a terrible investment right off the bat. I knew I needed to forge a new path. I just didn't know what that was. So I worked as a veterinary nurse while I figured things out. And the hospital I was working at was converting software systems, and I just kind of put myself out there and like volunteered to help the tech team, and that a spark was ignited. So I knew I wanted to work in software development. It seemed like a place where I could have great impact on a company, and after that like short experience, I got lucky and found an opportunity at a tech startup whose product was pet insurance. So I kind of molded the two worlds together, the world I was in and the world I wanted to be in, wiggled my way onto their tech team, came to the realization I plateaued at some point there, and that I know I needed to learn more, and they didn't have the time to teach me. So I learned about coding bootcamp from my coworker who was on that tech team. And I just went for it. I learned, I did research, I found a boot camp, I quit that job, I moved back in with my parents, I packed up my apartment into storage, and I just dedicated my summer to my coding boot camp and got a job 10 days after graduating from that program. I've been working in tech ever since, and I'm currently a consultant lead for a very large company. They asked me to be discreet and vague, but it's a multi-billion-dollar fast food chain, and you can take that how you want.
Wow, 10 days, that's awesome. How about you, Jose? Tell us your story.
Hey everyone, I'm Jose. Laura, that's an amazing story. And you keep referencing the fast food chain, and now I'm getting hungry. So I just want you to know that. But yeah, my name's Jose Mata. My story is an interesting one. So I'm a recruiter. So I've been in talent acquisition now for almost a decade. And my first job out of college, what my parents always pushed me to do was to be in finance and be in banking. I was told like that's the way to develop a career, like that's established. So my first job out of college was in finance. I was in mortgages. And where I think my story is interesting was starting this new job, was there for almost 2 years. And I started realizing when working with people that the most interesting part for me was when I spoke to people about their jobs. It was, when either applying for applications, applying for loans, applying for whatever that is, I always ended up spending more time learning about their jobs and what they did and the vast network that is technology. I remember talking to someone from Google and they're like, oh yeah, I'm a project manager at Google. I was like, wait, Google has project managers? So I just kept diving in more and more. So that led me to where I'm at right now. I made a few relationships and was lucky enough to join a recruiting technology consulting company. It was mostly commission, so it was an interesting little change from what I was doing, but it ended up working out, and now at Slom Consulting, which is a tech consulting company where we're helping clients deliver solutions. So it really just was an interesting story because I stayed as a relationship person, but just instead of talking about finance, I'm talking about and helping people find new jobs. So it's been a fun ride.
I love that. I also love hearing what other people do, not because I'm looking, but like just learning what's out there. It's always fascinated me as well. All right, so Maka, you're next.
Hi, everyone. So I am from Chile and I study psychology. After studying psychology, I work at school, working with kids with ADHD. And then I work in HR and I moved to the US and I didn't know what to do with my degree because to be a psychologist in the US, you need to do a PhD and I didn't want to do a PhD. So I started looking around. I say, okay, I want to get into tech. What can I do and how can I leverage my experience from Chile? So I decided to do an MBA because it was more like broad experience. So I didn't need it to marry with anything specific. And I went for it. I stopped working for 2 years and I was very lucky. I did an internship in tech, but in Malaysia, not in the US. So it was a big trip. I moved for 3 months to Malaysia. It was a great experience. And then I moved back to the US. But the problem was that I graduated in 2020, the worst year of this century. So it was very hard to find a job and I decided to do some other internships. I was working with a startup, a tech startup, and that helped me a lot too because getting into tech is a little bit challenging if you are not technical, in my experience at least, because they want people with experience in tech if you are not technical. So for me, having those internships was a door opening for the job I have now at BCG Gamma with the data scientist.
Awesome. As someone who was also looking for a job in 2020, I also remember that like it was a struggle, but definitely I'm glad to kind of feel like things are going somewhat back to normal, whatever that new normal is. All right. So I have another question for you all. If switching industries require a longer commitment, like going back to school, which some of you already alluded to this, being part of a boot camp or taking courses, was it a difficult decision to choose to pursue your tech career? What motivated you to keep moving forward? And was your family supportive? Laura, do you want to get us started?
Sure. Yeah. So like I mentioned earlier, I did attend a boot camp. Someone asked in the chat which one. So it was Coding Temple. They've got a lot of locations around the US and they're doing remote now after COVID. It was a 12-week boot camp. The decision was difficult just because I knew I had to immerse myself in it 100%. And I knew I needed to dedicate pretty much my whole life to that for those 3 months. So I had to quit my job and do all those things like I mentioned earlier. But I knew my heart was doing the right thing. And 3 months still sounded a lot easier than 4 years going back to school and getting, acquiring debt from a non-traditional degree. But just what motivated me is really that I just gave everything up to do it. So I had a lot to lose. My family was apprehensive, but but supportive. A lot of them still don't really know what it is I do for a living. But they were I was very lucky to have that support. So they let me, come back home and pursue this, and now they see that I was right.
I'm like, raise your hand if your family still doesn't know what you do. Yeah, I feel like that kind of happens, especially in the tech world as you start moving up and leaving the traditional roles that as a Latina, like from in my world, that was being a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher. So once I left that it started becoming like she has a job, but I don't know what it is. But they're very proud of me. So anyways, enough about me, Maga, you made a longer commitment. Do you want to share your experience?
Yeah, for me, it was an easy decision because English is not my first language. So the test for me to find a good job was to go through school and successfully go through the full 2 years because like being a person from another country is very hard. I needed to get used to the way of how Americans do those things, and it's totally different to Chileans and other Latin Americans. So I think for me was like, I thought when I was applying for school that if I didn't do like something like long-term, like a year-long master's or something like that, I wouldn't be able to find a good job at all. So my husband was very supportive, and I was lucky because he already had a job. So I had the time and the money to go to school. And it was a easy decision for me, just go through and follow my dreams.
Honestly, wow. I can only applaud that bravery of, moving to the US, getting an internship in Malaysia, and, just starting a whole new industry. So that's really powerful stuff.
Yeah, and I just want to add something that, like, I always feel pressure about my English, because obviously it's not like you guys are not perfect. But it was hard, but it's doable, and you just need to practice, and some doors are going to be closed on your face, but it's the process, and you just need to trust in yourself and do it again.
Thank you for adding. I'm just sorry. I was looking at the chat, the applause. I love that. All right. So kind of in a similar circumstance, what was the hardest part about looking for a job in tech, and how did you land your first job in the industry? Brian, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I think I'll add that different maybe than Laura and Maca. I didn't go to more schooling. For me, it was more of following the same trajectory that I was in, right? Grabbing the same experience that I previously had, but switching industries, which is a little bit different. And I also didn't go to school for marketing, even though I do marketing, right? So just putting it out there that it is also possible to find jobs that are not technical within tech, because you need a little bit of everything, right? You need people in HR, you need people in marketing, communications, you need people who project manage. There's so many roles within tech, which is what can make it a little bit difficult to find a job in tech, because it's a huge industry. And it's important that when you're, at least in my case, it was important that I identified the right types of companies and subsector within tech that I wanted to work in. And after doing that, I think the uphill battle when you're trying to switch industries a lot of times is the experience translation and getting companies to take that experience seriously. I will say that I know this sounds like lame advice, but if they don't appreciate your experience, it is not the right place for you to work at anyway. So it's important to remember that, though it can be hard when you're in the trenches, right? But it was important for me to also understand how to write a resume within tech, what are the types of things that they're looking for, which is a little bit different than, say, higher education where I was previously. They're looking for different types of wordings, and understanding all of that really made a difference. And the moment, because I started applying for about like 6 or 7 months, and the moment that I switched my resume into this other way, I think I ended up with like 4 different offers from 4 different companies. So it was just important that I understood that. I will also add that I think, I mean, at least in my experience, I come from a background where my family did not go to college. I'm the first person that went to college in my immediate family. So navigating this whole world was very new, and I didn't quite understand how to navigate negotiation, how to navigate what the different options are within tech and all of these things, that unfortunately I made the mistake of taking a job that I got excited for because it almost doubled my salary, but then I came to find out that like I was one of the least paid people in the company, even though I had more experience than a lot of other people. And also understanding options or stock options within tech is very confusing. So knowing and understanding that, make sure that you connect with somebody or that you have a network of people that can help you understand all of those things, I think can be super helpful. And I have a lot more to say, but I'll shut up now and let somebody else talk.
No, I mean, I love that. That was honestly a lot of information that I think we need to talk more about. All right, so I guess to kind of change gears just slightly, but still in the same question, Laura, given that you attended a boot camp, can you share your experience looking for and landing that first job in tech?
Yes. So step one was just figuring out what the heck did I want to do in tech. And I think like there's a lot of soul searching involved in making that decision. So I always tell people, like, before you even start applying, you need to figure out what your direction is, and you need to stick to a lane. Because I get a lot of questions about, should I have a resume for front end? Should I have a resume for back end? I'm like, pick one thing that you really want to do and just stick to that. Something that you enjoy, that your skill set matches. So that's number one, is just, do the research and pick something that resonates with you, that you think you're gonna enjoy and thrive in. And then when you are applying, I think for me, the hardest part was like finding a place that was receptive to my lack of experience, but open to my willingness to learn. And with that, honesty and humility became my best interview tool. You'll learn that in the tech industry, especially with a technical role, there's a lot of arrogance in the field. And people just pretend like they know everything. But the interviewer can see right through that. So it's always just best to say, you know what, I don't know the answer, but I would do my best to figure out how to do that. And so I always preach humility, especially when you're coming in as a fresher, and you're just coming out of your boot camp experience or what. You want to tell them the truth at that interview about where you're at with your skill set, because they're going to see through it either way. So you don't want to land a role and then get your first project and then you don't know how to deliver. That would be the worst case scenario. So I strongly advise against that. Just tell them, you know what, and it's about the language in your interview. You can, because I could have approached it, yeah, I attended this boot camp. I only have been doing this for 3 months, and cower like that. But the way I sold it was, I did this in 3 months. Look at how many projects I did in 3 months. Just wait until I'm full-time after a year, what I can do. So it's just about how you kind of sell yourself too. And the way I landed my first role, after I sent hundreds of traditional applications, I actually landed my first job through someone reaching out to me on LinkedIn. And I feel that's important to share, because I don't want you to underestimate the power of your presence there, especially in this field. And LinkedIn is a great tool. Use it, share your story, share your projects, brag about yourself, use it as a marketing tool for yourself. And because of LinkedIn, I've also been invited to interview for roles at Google and Facebook, which I never even thought would ever happen to me. So that's my best advice for finding a role in tech.
Awesome. So unintentional plug here, but definitely make sure to, use your LinkedIn, make sure it's up to date, check it frequently, create a presence. I know that's something I really need to work on, but I'm working on it, I promise. All right, so let's talk more about applying to a different industry. You've kind of already started alluding to this, but when you all were looking for roles, like how did you evaluate the role levels you applied to and what salary bands to pursue? Jose, what are your recommendations here?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll speak to this in the mind of the recruiter, what I would recommend to people as they're looking for new jobs. And Laura actually just said one, like, get a LinkedIn account. If you don't have a LinkedIn account, create one, make sure it's updated. I'm going to be completely honest, 95 to 98% of our hires come from LinkedIn. So that is our primary searching tool. So 100% go to LinkedIn, make that happen. What I would say about those two questions when it comes to evaluating role levels and what salary bands, one of the things I always like to tell people is that when you're evaluating like job descriptions, unfortunately, the majority of job descriptions are templated. We don't update them too much, unfortunately, and it does become a numbers game. So what I always recommend is find companies that you like and apply. It is a numbers game. So the real goal is to get in front of a recruiter. So after you apply to the job, reach out to the recruiter on LinkedIn or reach out to any recruiter that's a part of that company and say, hey, Jose, I applied to a job at Slalom. I don't know if you're the right contact, but would love to learn more about it. That's how you really are able to evaluate a role level and a salary band. Because I think what's one great thing about Boston and Massachusetts as a whole is that recruiters cannot ask about your current salary. So when you speak with a recruiter and they ask, hey, what kind of salary would you like? Always just make sure that you say, what does this position pay? What does someone in this level typically make? Hey, I read this on Glassdoor, things along those lines, because legally they cannot ask. Thus, if I were, the tips I always give is do not share what you're currently making or even your expectations. The most important part is that they mention it. So A, apply. B, try to get in front of a recruiter as quickly as you can. And when it comes to salary bands, the only way you really find out is when you speak with them. So ask open-ended questions and try to gain it from them instead of you bringing it into the conversation.
I love that. I love that peek behind the recruiting role. Brian, you kind of alluded to this as you were answering the previous question. Do you have any additional thoughts that you would like to share about this?
Yeah, I guess I can speak to experience of applying to smaller companies where maybe there's only like one recruiter. I work mostly in startups, so it might be a little bit difficult, and reaching out to the recruiter might be overwhelming to the recruiter. So also understanding those differences is important when you're talking about the companies, because a lot of times there's not even a recruiter, it's the person in the role who is doing the hiring. So for example, I hire people to work in my marketing department. If people start reaching out to me, I have a whole other job that's way outside of recruiting, and it would become overwhelming, and I probably won't get to see your email. So understanding those differences, I think it's important. But some of the things, I think tricks that I used is when I'm reading a job description, especially for smaller companies who tend to have less templated job descriptions than some of the bigger ones, I would answer the question for this bullet point, can I do that job? Or do I have anything similar in my toolbox that can translate to this? And finding a way, if you're finding yourself that mostly is yes, 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 then you should be applying regardless of the title. Obviously, if it feels like it's a title above where you want to go. I think a big mistake that I made when my first tech role was applying applying for roles that were a lot more junior than I currently had. And that made me frustrated, and it made the company frustrated at that. I was frustrated, right? I ended up performing at a much higher level than they expected, but the pay didn't match that. The responsibilities started to come in, and it's a lot harder for you to negotiate that pay once you're in, right? So understanding that is important. The other part is I believe in company mission. So understanding the company's mission and what they're trying to accomplish, especially in smaller companies, is super important, because you will find whether it's a good fit or not. And like Jose says, I never tell them what my salary expectation is. I always ask, what are you expecting to pay for this position? If they don't have an answer for me in that moment, I say, well, I need to learn more about this role before I give you an answer, but I would love to hear back from you, what you're expecting to pay for this. The good thing is that a lot of states are changing this. For example, New York, they're required to tell you, but it's about playing that back and forth game and make them tell you first before you say anything. Yeah.
Definitely. All right. So both Jose and Brian kind of started talking about the differences between company size. So let me just pose the question, or the official question is, are there differences between startups and big companies in recruiting or maybe other aspects of the companies?
Yeah, I can jump in on this one. And yeah, I think Brian did such an amazing job to explain some of the differences in recruiting, whether it's like, a whole group of recruiting and talent acquisition teams versus, the CEO and owner are sometimes the main recruiters. But what I would say from a technical perspective is that when it comes to large organizations, at points, there might be a training program, there might be mentorship, there might be diversity initiatives, which should help a lot of people in this chat. But the roles might be more limited because it's a large organization. They might only allow you to touch a small part of your application or have a really small part of the team. In comparison, when you do a startup, and many times they expect you to do a lot more things. So sure, there might be a little bit less structure. It might be a little crazier than working at a large organization, but many times you end up learning more. You end up touching new tech stacks that the large organizations just haven't invested in. So that's when you're really doing interviews. I would highly encourage, like, ask what your job will actually be, what responsibilities will actually be, and you'll really get a good understanding from both those sides.
I can add that for startups, the amazing thing sometimes is that it's basically going to grad school. Like, it can be this experience where you get to learn so much about a business or a department that sometimes if you're kind of questioning, like, do I want to go this way or that way? Like, it's a great time. It's a great place for you to kind of come in, wear a bunch of hats and be like, hey, I did not like this. So in my next role, I will do this. And I think this applies. I would like to think that it applies to any role within a startup. Like, I have a lot of engineer friends that come in and, like, they're required to do front end, back end. Sometimes, like, some of them have to do the UI and the UX because there's nobody else to do it. So it's an opportunity for you to kind of explore, but at the same time, that can be overwhelming for some. So I always tell people, know that in a startup, it can get a little crazy, but that's a little fun sometimes, and understand whether that is for you or not. The other hand, a bigger company, you're just going to come in and do, like, this one function. That can get a little boring for some, for me, for example. So I need something different. So understanding those differences and what you want out of your job, I think, is important.
I keep shaking my head because it's like, I've experienced this and I'm like, yes, I wish I knew this before I did that. All right, so switching gears completely. Imposter syndrome is something that anyone in any industry and any role can experience. As you transition into the tech world, would you have you experienced moments of imposter syndrome? How did it affect you and how did you overcome it? Laura, we kind of talked about this one-on-one. Do you want to speak more on this?
Yes, I would love to speak on this because I feel like it's such an important topic for everyone, especially for women, and especially for women in a technical role. My first year was the hardest because I didn't understand my place yet in the industry or the value of what I had learned in my boot camp. I felt like when I got my job, I was like so in denial. I felt like I didn't deserve to be there. I was like, everyone here is more talented, more educated. So it freaked me out a little bit. I was in my head a lot. The more I shared my story with people in the workplace, the more they were like so impressed by my journey. They loved my story because it was unique. And I've since learned to embrace my unique journey too. A lot of people have a very linear path in tech. So when they hear how I got into it, they're very intrigued by that. And the way I overcame it, honestly, was just giving myself the time, and just, you have to give yourself time to be new at something and even bad at something. And just knowing that's okay. As women, that's really hard for us. So I love this TED Talk by Reshma Saljani. You can look it up on YouTube. It's called Brave Not Perfect. And it's about how, women are raised to be perfect, and it keeps us from taking risks in our lives, especially in terms of our career. So learning that it's okay to not be an expert right away, and knowing that in tech, you're never going to be an expert. When I started seeing the senior engineers on my team using Google and using all these outside sources, I was like, oh, they don't know what they're doing either. We're all just out here winging it. And honestly, in terms of coding, boot camp was 10 times harder than what my actual job ended up being. Everybody says the same exact thing. So if you're going to take on a boot camp and you're feeling like you're hitting brick walls, it's totally normal. It's called boot camp for a reason, because it really does break you down. And it is very difficult. And in my mind, I just kept showing up for myself, even days that I didn't really know what was going on. Okay, and even up until my last day of boot camp, there was questions that I still couldn't figure out. And I just kept going and kept showing up. So it's just about leaning in and giving yourself the time and understanding that if you're new at something, that it's going to take time to be good at what you're doing. And that's kind of how I wiggled my way out of my imposter syndrome. So now I feel like I'm in a place where like I know kind of what I'm doing, but even if I took on a new role now, I'd be freaking out all the same. Tech just moves fast. And it's you all you have to do is show up and just understand that things take time.
I love that advice, honestly. And you can add me to the list of people who are impressed with your story. I really love how you just embraced it and added it as a tool for your growth and success. So I applaud that. Okay, so let's see. Are you part of any network for people in tech or that aspire to be in tech, whether that's in Facebook, Slack, LinkedIn? How do you leverage this network? Maka, when we actually met through a network. Can you talk more about this?
Yes. So I am part of Alpha and part of Latinas in Tech. And I have been meeting a lot of people through the network. And actually, that was one of my goals during school too, because I didn't know anyone in Boston. So I needed to start from zero. And the first place I went was to LinkedIn and look for people like me around and just reach out. I will say that most people are super open to talk. And the best way to know exactly what a job is to speak with someone doing that job. So I always reach out to people and try to have like 15 minutes, 20 minutes chats, and it's very helpful. And actually, I wanted to say also that same as Laura, I got my first job through LinkedIn. A recruiter reached out to me for my current role, and I didn't even apply online. Like it was just, she called me, I had the interviews, and the process was super fast and much less stressful than applying online and having the normal interview process where you need to wait longer, much longer.
Awesome. Well, no, I love hearing that. I'm curious though, because I'm going to ask you another question, Amaka, in what you just said, but I'm curious when you reach out to people, like, like, do you share a little bit more about yourself before you ask them, or do you just go straight with the question, like, can we connect?
Well, I always look for people with something in common with me, so I can like make that point on our like in a small intro, and then I ask for time to talk. And I will say more than 50% of people I reach out, they say yes. And it's about them talking about their experience. It's not for them to give me a job. I never ask for a job. I ask for like insights about the company, insights about the job, or if they can connect me with other people or tell me their career journey. I would say that like really people are very, very open. And that is also an American thing. I will never do that in Chile.
I did not know that was an American thing. I feel like that's so normal. Like, in high school, people were like, reach out, do informational interviews to learn what you want to do with your life. So to me, it's a normal thing, but maybe not. Jose, do you want to share anything about, networks such as Slack, Facebook?
Yeah, Maka, amazing. You need to teach a class on this. That was just an amazing, like, scientific approach to doing that. That was incredible. But what I would say is, when it comes to LinkedIn and leveraging networks, like, I'm on this panel because of Tequeria. I was in that group. Diana posted about it, and we got connected. So yeah, Tequeria, Latinas in Tech. Alpha. I know there's some ship brand, like there's so many of these groups. Highly encourage everyone to join on those. One of the parts that I think is really interesting is companies are now starting to embrace diversity initiatives as well. And one of the strangest parts about it is recruiters don't know how to find diverse talent. Like, how do you do a search and say, all right, we need to find more, Latinas and Latinx professionals that do technology. So one of the ways that recruiters are doing it are by looking into groups. If you're a part of Alpha, if you're in Latinas in tech, that allows us to help pick from a diverse group of people. So 1000%, I'd say join it, put on your LinkedIn, say that you're a member, and just be a part of these groups, because it's going to help recruiters find you, but also you're going to get so much mentorship. To Maka's point, you have so many people here willing to help you, that another easy way of doing it is just reaching out to those people in your network when it comes to these groups, and they're always here to help.
Awesome, I love that. All right, so we are getting near the end of our prepared questions, but I have two left here. So how has working in tech industry changed your life or your career trajectory? Laura, I know this was something that you were excited to share about. Do you want to speak more on this?
Yes, I would. So as a veterinary nurse, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but they don't make a lot of money. And so I had my bio degree and all of that, and I was very educated, and I was duct taping my shoes together, my first job out of college, because I was making $11 an hour with a major student loan bill. And it was very disheartening. So to say that tech has changed my life is total understatement, specifically salary wise, because, it really like quadrupled my salary from what I was doing before, right out of college. And it's just amazing the amount of opportunities there are out there, and all the opportunities for growth. Just with that alone, I mean, it's a total night and day. It completely has changed the trajectory of my life and my career and everything. I have things now that I never dreamed I could have, things a lot of millennials don't think they can have. So this home I purchased in February that I'm very proud of, all due to this career change that I made, because what I had was a salary issue, and I did something about it to fix my life. And yeah, so I wish, and I also would like to say, I wish more women would join the industry, because I actually feel like it's the ideal role for us. I feel like it's giving me an opportunity to work from home, contribute financially to my household. It's making starting a family seem like a possibility. And I am actually expecting in end of August. And it's just like, these are all things I never would have been able to do if I was still doing what I was doing before. And so I would love for people to pursue this. It really, like, no matter what lane you take to get here, I really, if you're going to take a technical role and go through a boot camp, you can. But I also love that we have people on the panel that don't have technical roles, because I didn't know about all the non-tech roles in tech. And it's just, I think knowing that is helpful for people to make this transition, just to know that there's hundreds of thousands of opportunities. It's insane. And not enough people to fill them, not enough people that are interested, because they just don't know that it's out there. So yeah, that's, tech has totally changed everything. And if you're gonna go for it, see it through to the end, because everything has been totally worthwhile.
I'm like, oh, it's so exciting. Congratulations on the house, and you're expecting. That's such an excited journey that you've been doing just in 2022. And super excited to hear that, like, the things could have been different, but you took the tech world by storm and are, flourishing in it. All right. So So my last question before we start asking you questions coming out from the attendees, but any advice that you'd share with someone who is starting their journey to transition into the tech industry? Brian, what are your thoughts here?
I mean, I think Laura has, everybody, I think Laura, Maca, Jose have been mentioning quite a few. I think communities are like any type of community is going to be a great place to start. You know, Twitter is another place where a lot of communities live. And for example, there's a marketing Twitter, and there's a lot of people there that are posting and willing to interact and be helpful. LinkedIn, all of these places. But the biggest thing is don't be afraid of translating your current skills into jobs within tech. Like Laura said, it can be life-changing in ways that I never imagined I would make. I'm not saying I make a lot of money, I'm rich by any means, but the amount of money that I can make now is so different than what I even ever imagined making. So the tech world can be really a great place for mobility for people of minorities, places where we a lot of times don't have the space to be able to move, and you have to wait for somebody to retire, right? In some other bigger industries. In tech, there's a lot of movement, whether it's at startups or larger companies, and knowing that and navigating, don't be scared to come here, because it can be life-changing. And always happy to chat with anybody trying to get into tech, but if you're specifically trying to get into marketing, communications, branding, I'm happy to talk. So yeah.
Awesome. Jose, what about you?
Yeah, the advice I give is you're already there. You're in this call. You're listening to how people got into the industry. So you've taken the first step. So congratulations on that. But nice to recruiters. I think that's such a big part of this process. You know, we help each person try to get their jobs. I know Maka and Laura already mentioned being pinged by recruiters on LinkedIn to get their first jobs. So I would just highly advise when recruiters reach out, be nice. You don't know what that relationship can turn into the future, and learn from every conversation you have. So whether that's from a recruiter, from a peer, from someone you network with, learn a little bit more about what you can get better at or what their jobs are. So that'll help you really hone in to what you want to do next.
Love that. I promise I'll be nice to recruiters. I always am though. All right. So that kind of concludes the information we prepared for you today. Now we'd love to take some time to answer some of the questions that are on your mind. Feel free to continue using the Q&A button in order to submit your questions, and we're going to get to as many as we can. So it's like panelists, this is more of, you know, if you feel comfortable answering the question, feel free to do so. And kind of look at my other screen here. All right, so I guess this is for anyone. What skill sets did you find the most marketable, particularly, you know, in like specifically for like front end or junior level roles? I guess we get, oh, go for it.
I'll say I can jump in on this one. I would say if you're doing front end, JavaScript, start there, but React is probably the hottest JavaScript framework at this point. And it's one of those that I know a lot of boot camps are teaching. So it's something that I would probably, if I had to say pick one front end language, start on React, because you can probably get a job pretty quickly with it.
Awesome. Thank you for that. All right. I have another potential question more for recruiters, but anyone can chime in. Are there any resources you'd recommend to check out in order to, you know, write your resume specifically to personalize it for those technical roles, or, you know?
I actually think this is when those network conversations get important. So Laura and Maka were talking about meeting with others, like write something for yourself, and then go to a peer, go to someone in your network and say, hey, what do you think of this? And I think that's a great way to start. Recruiters are here to help. I don't know for professional resume writers, we can kind of help in certain ways, but you're not going to get the best insight is other people in the industry, from my opinion.
In a lot of places, for example, I'll speak about Taqueria, they have a whole channel about resume writing. So you post your resume there, people from the industry will reply and give you pointers. I know when people have reached out to me, I'm happy to like even share my resume. And you know, I don't care if you copy the format and some of the wording of that I'm using, but if a rule of thumb is people are looking for results rather than knowledge that you have. So writing under a job description, I was in charge of this is not the same as saying I accomplished this. So understanding how to change that language can go a long way.
I love that. I have also seen the Taqueria channel where you submit your resume. You get responses very, very quick as well, and you get multiple views. So definitely, you know, a channel to leverage. And I'm sure there are other tech Slack channels that will provide something similar to that. It's just a matter of, you know, finding them, asking to join by just set. At least I know for Taqueria, you have to email them, be like, hey, I want to join your Slack channel. Others work the same way as well. Okay, here's another question in terms of preparing. How do you prepare for technical and behavioral interviews?
I think I can take this one because I just went on so many. So so for the technical roles, what you'll come to find is that the questions are very similar. It's almost like they find them online somewhere or something. Like there's, so you can actually go on Google and just look at most common technical interview questions. For example, when you're interviewing for Python, they'll tell you, oh, you know, at the technical part, they'll tell you write a function that does such and such. And you'll find that in other interviews, they'll ask you the exact same thing. So just preparing for a technical role is all about practice, practice, practice. And I can't say enough how if you go in the bootcamp direction to learn a programming language, the work isn't over when you're done with boot camp. You have to continue practicing and doing those types of questions. Code Wars is the best place to prepare for a technical interview. It is like a little game. You can choose whatever language you are learning and they'll ask you questions, you'll get points. Some places will even ask you if you have a Code Wars account and they'll look at your scores. And you might be able to skip your technical part doing that sometimes if they see like you've just been very dedicated to your practice. GitHub is another place if you're coding that you'll need to update regularly and have projects to show for, you know, you have to show something for your skills. Then the behavioral part is just like any other kind of interview, but you won't get to that part until you pass the technical round. So that's why I'm talking about the technical round more, because once you pass that and go into the behavioral one is just checking to see if you fit the culture of the company. And you can find advice about that in many different places, but soft skills for sure are important in tech. People think that they're gonna work in tech and not have to interact with people. That's just not the case. So just proving that you're a good communicator is very important. So that's my advice for tech interview.
I feel like that was also one of my misconceptions as well, where, you know, on TV, when you're seeing a technical role, it's just someone in the corner behind a screen, they never talk. But joining the tech world definitely is a whole different game. You definitely want to be able to communicate, collaborate, work as a team. So soft skills are key.
And let me tell you something. You're a technical person and you're very used to just doing that. If you come in from a different industry and you have any kind of soft skills, you're already standing out.
All right. Given that you all have, such different roles, can you share more on what a typical day looks like, or even a week looks like in a role within the tech field? Anyone want to share a little bit of what they do on a daily basis?
I mean, I can talk, but it's probably very different than Laura or Maca or even Jose. Because I work in a startup and I'm the head of a department, I'm mostly just looking. I'm in a lot of meetings. But the really cool thing is that I get to have my hand on a lot of things. And I think that's the case for anybody in a startup world, in the tech world. If no matter what your level is, be prepared to have a voice. Because even if you're just entry level, people are still interested in hearing how you feel about the strategy of the company, how you feel about a product, what your thoughts are on this. So it becomes a very collaborative environment, especially for earlier startups, like younger startups. So I think that's what's exciting, but like any day I might be talking to contractors. We work with a lot of contractors. I think in tech and startups, contractors and agencies are a big thing, part of the culture. So I'll be having meetings with them, then I'll having meetings internally. I'll be thinking about a strategy, but also sometimes, even though I might be a VP, I still have to do work. So sometimes I will still be writing a blog, or I will still be working on an email and editing this and that. And I think that's what makes startups and the tech world for non-technical people kind of different, is that you're not just like sitting in a chair and do this, but you actually have to do it too, which can be exciting.
All right, well, we are basically at time. I know we didn't get to all the questions that were asked. Apologies for that. I think we got wrapped up, and there's just a lot of information to share, especially if you are transitioning from a different industry going into the tech world. But I'm super excited to have you all here. Thank you so much to our panelists for sharing your thoughts and experiences and being so open during the discussion. Thank you all for attending this webinar. We hope that you found this session helpful, inspiring, and got some useful tips for your journey to break into tech. Please make sure to follow our social media accounts on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for resources and to stay up to date with, Alpha Boston content and future events. I know the tech committee is looking forward to hosting more events such as this one. And maybe we'll see some of you at Alpha's 50th anniversary convention happening in Orlando on August 7th through the 11th. It's going to be in person. It's going to be in Orlando. I don't know where you are in the world, but I always love my Florida weather. We wish you all the best and stay safe. Bye, everyone.